G'day folks, welcome to Flow Mountain Bike. My name's Will and this is one of the lightest and fastest mountain bikes we have ever tested. This is the brand new 2021 Canyon Exceed. The Exceed is Canyon's flagship cross-country race bike and it has been totally redesigned for this year. Now I've been testing this bike here for the past couple of months. This is the Exceed CFR Team and it is a sub 9 kilo carbon hardtail. Now before we go any further, I will mention that the full review of this bike is over at flowmountainbike.com. There is a link in the video description below. Click that and that will take you to the full review, which has a load more detail of my experience of testing this bike. In this video, I'll be giving more of a broader overview of the new Exceed. We'll be talking about some of the frame features on this bike and what's changed over the previous model. And more importantly, I'll be talking about how it rides on the trail and why in this day and age, when full suspension bikes are so good, why you would consider a hardtail like this. Having been completely revamped for 2021, the Exceed gets a brand new carbon fibre frame which has sharper lines and more aggressive tube shapes than the previous model. We have a new low-profile IPU headset with an internal steering limiter, and the cables now actually route through the headset for a super clean look up front. Out back we have the Quixel tool-free through axle, which is dead brilliant. Canyon's also moved the Exceed to the SRAM universal derailleur hanger standard, and we've also got a flat mount rear brake caliper too. Instead of an external seat clamp, Canyon has built the Exceed with an internal seat wedge for adjusting the saddle height. Now there are three carbon varieties of the new Exceed. There's the CF, the SLX and the CFR. All frames use the same mold, so they have the same shape and the same geometry, but you're basically reducing weight as you go up in price. The top end CFR is the lightest option, and Canyon is claiming that a medium CFR frame weighs just 835 grams, including hardware. That makes it one of the lightest hardtails on the market. That said, Canyon hasn't chased the lowest weight possible. The stiffness to weight ratio was really important on this bike, and we're told that there have been significant gains in stiffness at both the head tube and the bottom bracket area to make this bike as responsive as possible on the trail. Geometry on the Exceed has also been tweaked, but this is still very much an XC race bike. The head angle gets half a degree slacker, and that's now 69 degrees. The reach measurement has increased by 10 millimeters on every frame size, and the seat tube angle has steepened by over 2 degrees. That is now 75 degrees, which is very steep, very aggressive for a hardtail. One interesting note on the Exceed is that the chainstay length is slightly different on the larger frame sizes. So whereas the medium and smaller sizes come with a 425 millimeter chainstay length, the large grows to 430 millimeters and the extra large grows to 435 millimeters. Now for 2021, there are 9 models available in the Canyon Exceed lineup. All of those bikes are built around 29-inch wheels, a 100 millimeter travel fork and a carbon fibre frame. But as mentioned before, as you go up in price, you will get access to those lighter frames. Pricing starts at 2,799 Australian dollars for the Exceed CF5, and that goes all the way up to 10,199 Australian dollars. Yes, for a hardtail, and that's for the Exceed CFR Limited. The bike that I've been testing for the past couple of months is one step down from the top. This is the Exceed CFR Team. Now it does use that same super light CFR carbon frame, but the white paint on this model does add around 60 grams, giving it a claimed frame weight of 895 grams for those playing at home. It's spec'd with a Shimano XTR 1x12 drivetrain with Raceface Next SL carbon fibre cranks. We've got DT Swiss XRC 1200 wheels. These have carbon rims with a 30mm internal rim width. And up front we have a Fox 32 step cast fork in the factory series version with a remote lockout. This bike also comes with a striking one-piece carbon fibre handlebar and stem, which Canyon has developed alongside the new Exceed. Bar width is 740 millimeters and stem length is 80 millimeters, and that's the same on all frame sizes. It's not quite as light as you'd think. On our scales, this cockpit weighs 333 grams, which is quite a bit more than the Syncross Fraser cockpit that I tested earlier this year. That said, Canyon says it's engineered to be super stiff and super solid on the trail. It's also been designed with this teardrop shape on either side of the stem, and that makes for a really comfortable perch for your hands when you're in an aero tuck when you're motoring along on the fire road. Now, whereas the other high-end Exceed models come with a DT Swiss dropper post, the CFR Team comes with a carbon flex post, but that does mean this is the lightest option in the range. Out of the box with tubes installed, this bike weighs just 8.84 kilograms. Now, it's not the lightest on the market, and there's still room to remove weight from this bike if you wanted to, but it's still very impressive. At 175 centimeters tall, Canyon's online fit calculator suggests that I should be on a small frame size. Based on experience testing the previous Exceed as well as other Canyon mountain bikes, I ignored that advice and went for the medium frame size, which has a 435mm reach measurement, and it fits me really well. My advice would be that if you're on the border between two frame sizes, take a good close look at the reach measurement in the geometry chart, because that will largely determine what's going to be the best size for you. Being a hardtail, the Exceed is nice and simple to set up. We've got the Fox 32 step cast, which is a brilliant performer. Now, for my 68 kilo riding weight, I've got 80 PSI and 1 volume spacer inside the air spring, and I've got the rebound damping set around halfway. I will mention that while the rims and tires are tubeless compatible, this bike doesn't actually come with tubeless valves included in the box. Given this is a $9,000 mountain bike, Canyon really should be including both valves and sealant to give riders the option to go tubeless if they want. The other thing to watch during setup is the seat post wedge. It requires a small 3mm hex key, and you need quite a lot of torque. I found it a bit awkward to adjust out on the trail with a multi-tool, and if you under-torque that clamp, it does result in a bit of creaking on the trail. The other tricky thing is that as you tighten the wedge, the seat post will actually lift slightly out of the frame, and that can make getting a saddle height a little bit trickier than normal. My advice is to get it set up properly in the workshop and use a proper torque wrench before hitting the trail. So how does the new Canyon Exceed ride on the trail? Well, the standout attribute on this bike is just how quickly it accelerates. The stiff carbon fibre frame has exceptional power transfer, and there is very little energy loss here. Combined with the low weight and those whippy DT Swiss wheels, this bike climbs incredibly well. I also noticed the stiff carbon bars during hard sprinting efforts. Pull on those bars and there is just no flex at all. It allows you to push even harder on the pedals for short bursts, and the whole bike just lurches forward under every pedal stroke. Now, on more technical climbs, I did find the rear wheel could bounce around a bit more, so it does require more careful weight distribution compared to riding a full suspension bike. Because the Exceed is lighter and more responsive though, that comes into its own on technical climbs where you need to heave and thrust the bike up and over rocky and rooty ledges. Overall, I have to say the Exceed is the best climbing mountain bike I have ever tested, certainly for one that doesn't have a motor between the crank arms. As well as being fast and efficient up the climbs, the stiff frame on the Exceed also delivers a very precise and sharp feeling to the handling. This bike is super responsive and really agile through tight and twisty single track. The short back end helps you to carve and square off corners, and the drift-happy Maxxis Aspen rear tyre certainly doesn't need a lot of encouragement to engage in a slide. Now, the Aspen isn't the best tyre for loose conditions, and things can get a little bit hairy when the trail gets steep and rough. But it is a suitably fast tyre for dry, buffed out single track, and it allows you to turn the back end of this bike into a rudder when you need to snap it from left to right for rapid changes of direction. Given how efficient and responsive this bike is, the Exceed wasn't actually the nightmare on the descents that I kind of expected it to be. It is a more stable bike than its predecessor, and that largely comes down to the slacker head angle and longer reach, which help to increase this bike's footprint on the trail for more stability on the descents. In addition to that, Canyon has specifically designed the new Exceed around a 44mm fork offset, which helps to calm down the steering a little bit compared to the 51mm offset that previous Exceeds have come with. Sure, there's only so much you can expect from a sub 9 kilogram carbon hardtail with lightweight race tyres and a rigid seat post, but I wouldn't call the new Exceed twitchy at all. Certainly for those who are coming from older generation hardtails, especially those with smaller wheels, the Exceed is going to feel quite planted in comparison. Now, while the Exceed has a very stiff and responsive carbon frame, the seat post on the CFR Team model adds significant comfort on the trail. It's made by Canyon and it's called the VCLS 2.0. It's basically a big carbon fiber leaf spring, and Canyon says you get up to 20mm of travel out of flex through that seat post. It is really effective and it adds notable compliance at the saddle, which allows you to stay seated for longer on rough trails. Because you don't have to stand up as often on the trail, that helps you to save energy, which is something that will become more important on longer rides and longer races. While the post is brilliantly engineered, it is a little bit tricky to adjust tilt. You actually have to remove the whole seat post from the frame to access a 4mm hex bolt at the base of the post. Loosen that, and that allows you to slide the two halves against each other, thereby adjusting the saddle angle. There's also an offset saddle clamp, and you can flip that around to change the offset from 25mm to 13mm. Out of the box, the seat post came set up with the 25mm offset, and that gave quite a long overall cockpit length, especially compared to the other Exceed models which have a dropper post with a 0mm offset. I ended up flipping that clamp into the shorter offset, which helped to bring the saddle forwards and get my knees further over the pedals to improve power on the climbs, but it also shortened the effective cockpit length, which made it more comfortable on the trail. While that carbon flex post is super comfortable, I'd really like to try the Exceed with a dropper post. I'd argue that a dropper post is even more useful on a cross-country hardtail because on the descents you are bouncing around a lot more, so being able to drop that saddle and make better use of your elbows and knees to absorb impacts not only make the ride smoother, but also add confidence too. Of course, you can add a dropper post to this bike, but if you are thinking that way, then have a closer look at the rest of the Exceed lineup because there are several models that come with a dropper post as stock. One key change I did make to our test bike was with the tyres. In the search of more traction and more comfort, I fitted a pair of 2.4-inch wide Maxxis tyres with a Recon Race on the front and an Aspen on the rear. Now, both of these use the new school wide trail casing, which is optimized for use with a rim that has a 30mm internal width. Together, this is a brilliant combination. They're still quite lightweight tires, both weigh under 800 grams each, and they're still quite fast rolling on the trail. But the supple high volume casings provide a really noticeable improvement in damping and comfort. I also fitted a Tire Invader tubeless insert inside the rear wheel. Now that weighs just 72 grams, so it doesn't add a whole lot of rotational mass, but it does add pinch flap protection and rim protection too, something that's really important on my local rocky trails. With that insert on the back and the bigger tires on this bike, I was able to run quite low pressures, just 20 psi on the front and 23 psi on the rear. As well as helping to smooth out the ride, this also boosted traction significantly, particularly with the excellent Recon Race on the front. Now, I didn't have any big problems with our test bike, though unfortunately after 2 months of testing, the race face bottom bracket is starting to feel and sound a little bit rough. Now, these cranks are very light. They weigh just 468 grams for the arms and a 34-tooth chainring. They also use a 30mm axle, and that does mean that the bottom bracket bearings and the seals have to be quite small in order to fit inside the PF92 bottom bracket shell. Personally, I'd much rather see an XTR crankset and bottom bracket in this bike to match the rest of the drivetrain. Otherwise, the XTR group set has performed well, and again, the XTR race brakes have proved to be a real highlight with a really nice light lever feel and superb modulation. The Exceed frame itself is finished to a really high standard. I love the Quixel through axle at the back, and the IPU headset is brilliant. The steering limiter is completely unnoticeable on the trail. I never hit full steering lock while actually riding the bike, but it does provide a barrier to stop the shifter and brake lever from smashing through the top tube in the event of a crash. I will say, if you're not so worried about grams, it's worth looking at some of the cheaper Exceed models because they come with all the same frame features as this top-end CFR frame, albeit with a little bit more weight, but a significantly cheaper price. And that brings me to the verdict of the 2021 Canyon Exceed. Now, with its newly engineered carbon frame, the new Exceed is lighter, stiffer, and sharper than its predecessor. Whereas some other hardtails on the market are chasing comfort, Canyon has doubled down with the Exceed. This is a pure, unapologetic, hardwired hardtail. It places a strong emphasis on power transfer and precise handling, and along with the low overall weight, it's a fantastic climbing bike. Of course, it does require more physical and mental effort on rough trails compared to a full suspension bike, and there's also less margin for error here too. Even still, I was surprised with what I could get away with on the Exceed thanks to the stout frame, supple fork, and the stable wheel set. Add a dropper post in the equation and you'd have a seriously deadly treadly for dissecting apart tight technical XCO race courses. And from that perspective, the Exceed is for sure a legitimate option over a full suspension race bike. As well as being lighter, more responsive, and more efficient on the trail, a hardtail is also cheaper, simpler, and easier to maintain, making it a really appealing option for privateer racers. Sure, it might not be the cushiest option out there, but it doesn't get much more responsive or as engaging on the trail as this. Now, as mentioned before, the full review of the Canyon Exceed is now live on flowmountainbike.com, and we have a link in the video description below, and that will take you through to the full review of this bike here, which has a load more detail about our experience of testing this lightweight hardtail. If you've got any questions for me about this bike, make sure you drop them into the comments section below, and if you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, make sure you do that right now because we have lots more bike reviews and destination videos coming your way soon. Otherwise, that's it from me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time. Tooroo!